They didn't even come inside. They parked the car close to the entrance, left the engine running, and opened the trunk like they were dropping off a delivery. I saw the nurse come out with a clipboard in her hand, confused at first, then understanding too quickly. My bag was handed over without a word to me. No hug. No proper goodbye. Just a smile from her that didn't touch her eyes, and a quick, rehearsed nod from him before they pulled away. They didn't even wait to see if I got inside. They were already halfway down the street before the nurse helped me through the sliding doors. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I just sat by the window as the sun moved slowly across the floor, holding that cup of lukewarm tea they always offer newcomers. And as I watched the street empty out and the light begin to fade, I remembered something they didn't know I had never forgotten. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to thank you for listening. It's a quiet thing to feel heard. And I've learned that sometimes being heard matters more than being helped. If you've ever felt like you were just something to manage, something to schedule, instead of someone to love, I see you. I felt that silence too. And if this story reminds you of something you've carried alone, you don't have to carry it by yourself anymore. Tell me in the comments if you feel like it. Or just say you understand, that's more than enough. My name is Eliza Simmons. I'm 79, and my knees don't move like they used to, but I wasn't born old. I was born useful. I was the one people called when they needed a meal, a place to rest, someone to sit with them through the hard parts. I raised 3 children mostly on my own after my husband passed. Cancer doesn't care how young you are or how much love you've still got left to give. I worked at the post office during the day and cleaned offices at night. I didn't complain. I was proud to do what needed doing. I packed lunches, braided hair, stitched hems, and never missed a parent-teacher meeting unless it meant someone else in the family had a fever. My son, Michael, used to be soft-spoken. He was the one who cried when he scraped his knee, but always brought me flowers from the school garden on Mother's Day. Marcy, his wife, she came later. Polite, always said the right thing, but I could feel it. Her words were warm, but her eyes were cold, the kind of cold that doesn't need to say much to be felt. I thought if I kept being helpful, kept making room, kept quiet, that I'd be loved. I thought love meant giving and never asking for anything back. That was my first mistake. It started with a slip in the kitchen. I'd done it 1,000 times before, reached for the cinnamon on the high shelf, the one just above the chipped mug I liked for evening tea. But this time, my balance shifted just enough and I went down hard on my side. It knocked the wind out of me, but I didn't break anything. Just a bruise on my hip and a scrape down my arm. I sat there for a minute, feeling more embarrassed than hurt. I cleaned the floor, cleaned myself up, and called Michael just to let him know I shouldn't have. The tone in his voice changed the moment I said the word fall. Suddenly I was fragile. Suddenly I couldn't be trusted with a stove or stairs or silence. Within a day, they were both at my door. She walked through the house like she was taking inventory. He looked at everything but me. They brought up brochures and pamphlets before I even poured the tea. Called it a senior community, a safe space. Said things like, "You deserve rest and peace of mind." I listened quietly, nodding the way people do when they've already lost the vote. But I knew what this was. It wasn't care. It was clearance. They wanted space, her especially. She wanted her house back without the edges of my slippers showing under the bathroom door. They framed it all as kindness, dressed it up in the language of concern, but I saw it for what it was. Distance, wrapped in duty. An obligation, smoothed over with smiles. They made it sound like a favor, but it felt like a decision they'd rehearsed. I sat at my own table, in my own home, and realized I was already halfway gone. They packed my bags while I slept. I dozed off on the couch after dinner, the television humming low, the kind of rest you only get after years of taking care of everyone else. When I woke up, something felt off. The room was too bare. The air too still. I looked around in my favorite chair, the one with the soft cushion and worn arms from years of reading by the window, was missing. I checked the hallway. The throw blanket my sister crocheted for me in the 70s was folded on the floor by the door like a leftover, not even packed. I walked to my bedroom and found 2 small suitcases zipped and stacked like an afterthought. No labels, no notes, just decisions already made. I opened one. Toiletries, a nightgown, one pair of house slippers, and a plain cardigan I never wore because the sleeves scratched my wrists. I checked the second. 3 outfits, all of them wrong for the season, and not a single photo. Not the one of my wedding day. Not the one of Michael as a boy in his Easter suit. Not even the one with all 3 of my children standing on the porch with ice cream dripping down their hands. When I asked where the photo albums were, she said they didn't fit. When I reached for my lace shawl, the one I wore every Christmas, she said it was too delicate to travel. I stood there in the doorway of my own bedroom, surrounded by things I hadn't chosen, with pieces of my life missing, edited out without permission. They left me with toothpaste, slippers, and silence. All the things they thought I needed to survive. Just not the things that made me feel alive. I sat near the window. It was the kind of window with thick glass that doesn't open. The kind that traps the warmth without letting any of it breathe. The sun crawled slowly across the opposite wall, stretching long shadows over linoleum floors and the edges of a worn rug that didn't belong to me. A nurse had brought me a cup of tea not long after I was settled in. She was polite, her hands quick, her voice soft and practiced. She smiled, but not with the kind of smile that reaches inward. It was the smile of someone paid to be kind, someone trained to show care, not offer it. The tea was already cooling when it touched my hand, the kind of lukewarm and that tells you it wasn't meant to comfort, just to be placed there so they could say they did. I held it for a while, more for company than taste. The room smelled faintly of bleach, and something floral trying to cover it, the kind of scent that settles behind your eyes and stays. Outside the hallway, I could hear the squeak of shoes, the rolling of carts, the occasional clipped voice calling out a reminder. It was quiet, but not peaceful. I had my bag beside me, one of the ones they had packed, and I reached inside it more out of instinct than need. And there it was. The old brown wallet with the split seam on the corner. I opened it slowly, flipping past library cards and receipts I'd forgotten I'd saved. Then I found it, tucked deep behind an old insurance card and a photo of a cherry tree I'd once planted. The card, white, heavy stock, gold edges worn with time. A name I hadn't said aloud in years, and a number I'd never dialed. I stared at it for a long time. Years ago, I helped someone in a way no one else would. I didn't expect anything back. I wasn't that kind of woman. But I remember his words like they were whispered yesterday. He looked me in the eye and said, "If you ever need something, really need something, call me." And I never did. Until now. The number was smudged, years of wear pressing into the paper like time trying to erase it, but my fingers remembered it before my eyes did. I traced the numbers slowly, letting my thumb rest against the corner of the card like I was holding someone's hand through it. The room around me faded, the bleached air and humming light, the clatter from down the hall. It all quieted. I didn't hesitate. I didn't stutter. I reached for the receiver and began to dial. I don't remember hearing the dial tone. All I know is that the phone didn't ring more than once. A voice, calm and familiar, answered immediately. "Miss Simmons?" There was no need for introductions, no questions, just a voice that still held respect in every syllable. "Yes," I said. That's all I needed to say. "We've been waiting." It was like a door opened inside me. I didn't have to explain the bruise on my hip, the hollow in my voice, the silence in my room. He already knew, not the details, but the feeling. The kind of knowing that doesn't need names or dates, just tone, just breath. "I never thought I'd have to call," I said. "And I never forgot what you did for my mother," he replied. "Stay where you are. We'll come." That was it. No panic, no disbelief, just certainty. The kind that holds you when your world has been pulled out from under you. The kind that reminds you you're still somebody to someone. I didn't ask who else knew or how long it would take. I didn't ask where I'd go or what came next. I didn't have to. I hung up, and for the first time in hours, I let my shoulders fall back. I let the breath out that I didn't even know I was holding. And in that quiet room where nothing smelled like home and everything felt borrowed, I felt something settle in me again. Not hope exactly, but something stronger. A sense that my story hadn't ended just because someone else decided to stop reading. I watched the light shift across the wall like it was trying to tell time without the clock's permission. The hours stretched, pulled thin like thread between fingers that done too much mending. I heard the nurses change shifts, their shoes squeaking the same way, their voices softer at night, less cheerful, more tired. My tea had gone cold, untouched on the table beside me, but I didn't move. I didn't need anything. I just sat there, counting the things I used to be needed for. The hallway grew quiet as the sun slipped away completely, leaving only the blue flicker of the television in the common room, too far to see and too loud to ignore. I leaned back in that stiff chair and let my mind go where it hadn't gone in years. I thought about my grandmother's kitchen, with the stove that clicked before it caught flame, and the bread she used to bake every Saturday morning. I thought about the house I grew up in, the one I sold to buy the one they live in now. The house with the backyard big enough for 3 birthday parties at once, and the porch I painted every spring without fail, even when my knees begged me not to. I thought about the land, the one I still own, passed down from my father, tucked up in the hills where the soil stays soft and the trees have names. They never asked me about that deed. I suppose they assumed it belonged to them too, like I did. Time moved slowly. I watched the shadow from the doorframe stretch and curl as the hours changed, watched the nurse peek in once, twice, then stop altogether. I let it all pass through me. No anger? Not yet. Just the weight of knowing. I'd spent my life giving meals, giving rides, giving up rest, giving away my name when they needed someone to sign the forms, giving second chances and third ones too. And somehow, after all that, they still managed to take me too. Not my things, me, like I was just another piece of the puzzle they were tired of finding room for. But I was still here, breathing in a chair they didn't pick, holding the memory of a call they never imagined I'd make. And as that thought settled in, something new started to rise. Not bitterness, not even pride, something firmer. The kind of quiet resolve that doesn't need to announce itself to feel real. I didn't know what the next hour would bring, but I knew this. I wasn't waiting to be saved. I was waiting to be remembered by someone who never forgot me. And that made all the difference. I must have dozed off somewhere between midnight and the hour the air began to settle into something heavier. Not sleep, not really. Just that kind of stillness where your eyes are closed, but your thoughts keep whispering behind them. The kind of rest where your body is tired, but your spirit is pacing the room. It was quiet, even for that place. The last set of nurses had long finished their rounds, and the television that buzzed down the hall had gone to some late-night infomercial that no one was watching. The walls had that eerie kind of hush only hospitals and nursing homes seem to master, where even time walks softly. And then I heard it. Not loud, not sharp. Just a hum, steady and low, like a promise. Not the mechanical clatter of a delivery van, not the rustle of a cart's wheels. Something smoother, slower. I sat up without knowing why. My hands rested on the armrests like they had something to steady for. I turned my head toward the window, not expecting anything, just drawn by instinct. The streetlight outside flickered once, as if it too had grown tired of waiting. And then, through the glass, I saw it. A black car. Sleek, unmarked, headlights off. It glided up to the curb without sound, like it had no business announcing its arrival. It didn't belong in that parking lot with the cracked lines and faded signs. It didn't belong in front of a building filled with forgotten people and leftover routines. That car belonged to intention. And it had come for me. The driver stepped out, tall, calm, dressed in a long coat that moved like it knew its place in the night. He didn't look around. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight to the door and rang the bell like he wasn't asking permission, only giving notice. I could hear footsteps approaching. The nurse on duty, younger than my granddaughter, opened the door with that practiced look of suspicion they all wear after midnight. He said nothing at first, just handed her a folded paper and a small envelope. She looked at it, then at him, and something in her face shifted. Not fear, not alarm, just confusion that quickly settled into quiet understanding. He stepped inside just enough to see me, seated in the chair I hadn't moved from all night. Our eyes met, and he nodded. Not deep, just enough to say, "It's time." "Miss Simmons," he said gently, like I was royalty instead of a resident, "we've been expecting you." The nurse turned to me, her voice caught halfway between protocol and respect. Do Do you need anything before you go? I stood up slowly, not because I was weak, but because I wanted the moment to last long enough to remember. I picked up my small bag, the one with barely anything in it, and walked toward the door with the kind of posture you earn from surviving. No rush, no drama, just steps that knew where they were headed. I passed the nurse without a glance, not out of spite, but because I had nothing left to explain. I didn't owe anyone in that building a goodbye. I didn't owe them softness for the kind of care that forgets your middle name. I didn't say goodbye, I said nothing. The door closed behind me with a quiet click. No fanfare, no farewell, just the soft sound of a woman leaving a place that mistook her stillness for surrender. And when that car door opened and I stepped inside, I felt it. Not fear, not relief, just a return. A return to something I hadn't felt in a long time, being expected. They forgot something important. In their rush to reposition me into a smaller life, to box me up like a worn-out season and tuck me away where I'd be easier to manage, they overlooked the one thing I had never handed over. I still own their house. The very roof they slept under. The one they repainted in soft grays and filled with furniture I never touched. The one with the porch lights that flicked on automatically every night. I paid the down payment on that house with the insurance money from my husband's passing, and I held on to the deed like it was the last stitch in a family quilt that had started to fray. When they talked about taking care of me, they forgot to take care of their paperwork. They had assumed, I think, that with time and distance, I had passed things over. That maybe in my softness, or my trust, I had let the details fade. But I didn't. I never filed the updated will they handed me in their careful language, the one that left everything simpler. I read it, I folded it, I set it in a drawer, and then I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Not because I didn't trust them, but because I was waiting for the moment I might need their kind of help. James. That's the name on the card I kept tucked behind my old insurance slip. He used to be just a clerk in the courthouse when I first met him, barely shaving, full of eagerness, always polite to the older women in the filing line. His mother was about to lose her home. Paperwork, unpaid bills, confusion stacked against her. I sat with her one day after church, helped her sort out the stack, made a few calls, and kept her from being turned out before the winter. James never forgot that. And now, he was a lawyer. Not the kind that puts his name on benches or billboards, but the kind people whisper about when they say, if you want it done quiet and done right, call him. And I did. What they didn't realize, in all their careful talks about my future, was that I had never stopped securing mine. I knew the day might come when my silence would be mistaken for absence, when my giving would be confused with surrender. So while they plotted to forget me, I planned not to forget myself. Every document they left on the table, I reviewed. Every promise they made to each other behind closed doors, I let settle, and I waited. I didn't do it to be cruel. I did it to remember who I was. Before the bruises, before the, we just want what's best, before they started speaking about me in the past tense. Ownership is not about control. It's about memory. I remembered every penny I spent, every wall I painted, every emergency I solved while they slept easy upstairs. And now, as that car moved through the city streets toward something I didn't yet know, but fully welcomed, I felt the weight of that deed not as paper, but as power. Power I had held quietly, respectfully, but fully. They thought they had turned the page, but I had never stopped writing the story. They came back the next morning, likely expecting to find me just where they'd left me, seated quietly by the window, sipping that lukewarm tea, waiting like a patient file on a shelf. Maybe they brought a box of pastries to look thoughtful. Maybe she rehearsed a few kind words in the car, just enough to say they tried. I imagine they didn't rush. I imagine they parked in the same spot as before, stepped through those automatic doors with ease, not expecting anything to have changed. But when they asked the nurse at the front desk for Eliza Simmons, the only thing they were met with was confusion. She's not here, the nurse likely said. And I wonder if Michael's face fell then, or if it tightened the way his jaw always did when something didn't go according to plan. I wonder if Marcy's voice rose a little too high, asking for a manager. But no matter who they spoke to or how long they stood there looking stunned, the answer stayed the same. I wasn't there. What they didn't know was that while they were driving to visit out of obligation or guilt, or maybe just to check that I hadn't caused a fuss, someone else had already delivered something far more valuable than an apology. A letter. It was waiting for them at home, hand-delivered. No stamp, no frills. Just cream-colored paper in a thick envelope with their names on it in handwriting neither of them recognized. I imagine they found it on the porch, balanced carefully between the mat and the flower pot I gave them for their anniversary years ago. The one they'd forgotten to water. Inside that envelope was nothing dramatic. No accusations, no long list of wrongs. Just a letter. A legal one. One that read, simply, "This property is now under review. Please contact the office listed below regarding continued residence." It was signed by my lawyer, the same quiet man they never thought twice about when he used to help me in the background. The same man who now held the keys to the next part of my story. And when they turned their keys in the front door to step inside, I imagine the sound of the lock not turning startled them. I imagine they tried again and again. But it didn't matter how many times they twisted or how long they stood there blaming the lock, the truth was already in their hands. Blood may run thick. But ownership? Ownership runs by paper, and I had the paper. I had always had it. They had counted on my silence, on the idea that I would never push back, never protect what I built, never remember the details they brushed aside. But I had not forgotten. Not the names on the deed, not the dates of the documents, not the promises I made to myself when I was packing a life into 2 bags without being asked. And now, with one letter, I had reminded them of something far more powerful than anger. I had reminded them of consequences, quiet ones, paper ones, ones signed in ink that didn't smudge. I didn't need to be there to explain it. The paper did the talking for me, and they finally had to listen. A week later, I sat on my old porch. The same one where I used to sip tea in the early mornings before the house filled with little footsteps and busy voices. The same one I painted every other spring, watching the wood lines shift and split with age, like everything does if you live long enough. Only this time, the tea in my cup was hot, the steam curling into the crisp morning air, and the blanket across my lap was soft in the way only something familiar can be. I didn't need anything extravagant. No grand gesture, no parade, no explanations from anyone. I just needed that chair, that blanket, that cup, and the sound of the wind moving through the trees the way it used to when my husband sat beside me and the world still felt within reach. I didn't gloat. There was no part of me that wanted to stand up and shout, "Look what I did." Because the truth is, when you've been ignored long enough, just being seen again is more than enough. A neighbor walking her dog waved from the sidewalk, her eyes lighting up when she realized it was me again. She didn't ask questions, just smiled like someone who remembered I belonged here. A friend from down the road came by later that afternoon with a small bouquet wrapped in a paper towel, purple flowers, lavender, I think. She said she didn't want to stay long, just wanted to welcome me home. I thanked her and meant it. That was all I wanted, peace without a price tag, kindness without explanation. Inside the house, things were quiet, not empty, just still. The kind of stillness that doesn't ache but exhales. I opened windows. I let the air move through the rooms again. I walked slowly down the hallway, ran my hand along the edge of the table that had been mine since before Michael was born. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just took it all in, like someone returning to a part of herself she thought had been buried, but had only been waiting. I didn't change the locks because I was angry. I changed them because sometimes you have to decide who gets access to your peace. Not everyone should be allowed to knock twice and come in. Some doors are meant to stay shut once they're closed. I wasn't building a wall. I was planting a garden around my boundaries. I didn't need revenge. I needed room to breathe again. Room to sit without watching the clock. Room to pour tea and drink it while it was still hot. Room to feel safe in my own silence. To be still without feeling forgotten. And as I sat there on that porch, wrapped in that old soft blanket with no weight on my shoulders except the morning sun, I realized something that took me nearly 8 decades to understand. You don't need to be feared, or praised, or even thanked to reclaim your life. You just need to decide that you matter enough not to be erased. And in that moment, with nothing loud around me, I felt more whole than I had in years. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't wondering what they would say or do next. I was home. Not just in a house, but in myself. And that was the real return. The people who left me weren't family. They were just blood. Real family doesn't drop you off like a package and drive away before the door closes. Real family stays, listens, remembers. What I learned is that betrayal doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's just silence, a slow fading, a quiet forgetting. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I stood up when it mattered, and I walked out of the story they tried to write for me. And I didn't look back. Not because I didn't care, because I finally cared for myself. Have you ever been left behind by the ones you raised? Tell me below. Or just write. I remembered my name. That's enough. And if you've ever been called a burden, but chose to become a blessing to yourself, please subscribe. And if you're watching this alone tonight, this voice, it's for you. Thank you for watching.